name of the talk today is called The Theory of Everything. We plan on covering all the key points to why Jews believe what they do, sorted from beginning to end. Now, there's no way for me to make this completely comprehensive. However, I want to show you what I plan on covering today, and I'm going to need your full attention. And we're going to have a break in between, but a lot of the questions that you've been asking myself and all the different rabbis are all covered in today's class. So we're going to start with the big G word, God. Is there a God? Is that a myth? Is it just belief? How do you know there's a God? We're then going to move on to what does Judaism say scientifically about evolution, including dinosaurs. We're going to speak about dinosaurs and such. We're going to speak a lot about science. We're then going to move to Torah. How do we know Torah is true? Why do we believe it's true? Why isn't it just a novel and a book? We did a little bit of this in Poland. We're going to do it much more comprehensively now. We're then going to move to oral law. Oral law. And oral law is Talmud. What is all that about? What are the rabbis all about? And then we're going to end up with the state of Judaism today. And we're going to speak a little bit about denominations within Judaism, Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and so on. So this is going to hopefully cover the gamut of questions. Now, I expect that this class will make you ask more questions afterwards, and that's the way it should be. But at least you should feel confident that by being Jewish, you don't have to suspend your brain. You don't have to suspend reality. You can look at it. You can believe in it. You can subscribe to it. You can be proud of it. And it's not just for men in Mea Sha'arim, where we went yesterday with the curly side locks and the furry hair, but everyone else back in Florida or in Dallas or in Berkeley or wherever it is, they are the smart intellectual ones. And then you got the backwards guys dressed in the dark clothing. Something totally different has emerged. And what I want to do is I want to just keep with the intellect today. So there's going to be no weepy stories this morning, none of that, just pure statistics, data, research, and so on. Okay? Are you ready for this? Are you pumped? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Starting out. I have spoken with people who have gone on with their lives, and I ask them, do you believe in God or don't you? And their answers are, I don't know, I'm not sure. So sometimes for dramatic effect, I say, so stop what you're doing, whatever you're doing, stop. You know why? Because it's the most important question in the universe. There is no more important question than if we're created for our purpose, thus we have a purpose, or whether we're just chaos and strings vibrating. What are we? Who are we? It is the most important question. And for the life of me, I can't understand how we can shelve a question like this and go on with our lives as if, okay, that's a good question. One day I'll face it. Stop. Everything that you do the rest of your lives will depend on the answer to this question. Isn't that obvious? Now, I'm preaching to the converted here because you're obviously thinkers. That's how you got on the Akiva trip. And you just are. I've gotten to know you. You're an intellectual bunch. I'm speaking about for those peers of yours, those friends who somehow are comfortable taking the most important question, is there purpose or no purpose, and not dealing with it now, but making important decisions in their life, which would change if the results of that question were different, okay? So is there a creator or not? Now, one of the words I don't like to use, honestly, is the word God. And the reason I don't is because the word God, if I were to ask my little kid to make a picture of God. Here are crayons. Draw a picture of God. What would I get? What do you think I would get? Rachel, what would I get? What? Maybe a stick figure. Maybe a man with a beard. God's got to be a man. He's got to have a beard. Got to be white, right? Yeah? Little face in the sky. Purple, right? We don't know, when we say God, from our youngest days, we've begun to picture images that are immature, they're infantile, and that's okay, because that's who we are. But the problem is, we grow up, we get older, and we still picture the man with the beard in the sky. And that's why most often I'll use Hashem, or I'll use the word the Almighty, or the Creator, but never God, because there's just too much baggage to the word. Do we agree with that? It's laden with baggage. More than that, because you've got other religions that scream from their pulpits and their pews, and God said this, and the Lord Almighty said that. So you picture something that you shouldn't be picturing. So let's just take that away. We're going to use different words, even though I do have the word GD over here. Now, is there a God or isn't there? When you are thinking about that question, and we must think about it, it's incredibly important. I'm not speaking as an Orthodox Jew. I'm not speaking as a Jew. I'm speaking as a human being stranded on a desert island. Is there a God or isn't there? You have three choices. Three choices. There are three choices when you approach this question. Two of the choices are intellectual. One of them would be considered a non-intellectual choice, which is okay. We're allowed to make non-intellectual choices, but if we pride ourselves as being thinkers, one of the three choices is non-intellectual. Choice number one is we believe. I believe there's a God. Okay? We believe there's a God. Number two, believe. I-E-V. Okay. Creative. Choice number two is you're an agnostic. Choice number three is an atheist. Now, a believer says, I believe based on the evidence that there's a God. An agnostic says, I'm not sure. I see some reasons I could think yeah, some reasons no. I could believe 99% that there's a God, but 1% I'm just not sure, or the opposite. Either way, they're called an agnostic, okay? And there's an atheist that knows that there is no God. Which of the three are not an intellectual stance to take? So, the one that is the non-intellectual stance would be the atheist. If you're an atheist, that's okay, but you're probably not an intellectual to be an atheist. Why is that so? That is so because, Brian, an atheist who knows that there is no God knows that there is a negative. And there's no way to prove a negative. The most you could say is, I don't have a way of proving it as a positive. But to prove a negative means I have figured out every possible way to prove that there's a God, and at the end of the day, it can't be proven, or at the end of the day, I have proved that there is no God. It is a non-intellectual stance to say, I know that there's no God. How do you know? Well, I proved it. Maybe you're using the wrong proof. Maybe you're experimenting incorrectly. Yes?
Well, then why is believing considered intellectual?
Believing is intellectual because we can look at evidence, and the evidence can be strong enough to say, based on the evidence, this tells me that a being, however we're going to define God, that evidence says that based on that, I can believe that there is a God. In the same way that I've never seen a boson or a quark, and yet based on the evidence, I can believe that quarks exist.
Oh, whereas like with atheism, you have to like prove that the evidence is invalid.
Exactly. Yes?
If you can't definitively prove that there is no God, you also can't definitively prove that there is.
Right, that's why I didn't say there is no stance that says 100%. Belief simply means that I believe that based on the evidence.
But what makes that a more valid decision than believing that there isn't based on the evidence.
Believing that there isn't always leaves room. Just like this leaves room. Belief leaves room. Atheist doesn't leave room. Once you've left room, you're by definition an agnostic, even if that room is minute. An atheist believes that there's no God, but doesn't just believe it, believes that it cannot be, there's no way to know that there is a God. Agnostic says, I've taken all of the evidence, and based on the evidence, I don't think there is. But were new evidence to come up, an atheist feels with certitude that there is no God. And that's why it's not intellectual. What a lot of people do is they call themselves atheists, but by definition they're not. They're actually agnostics.
So, do you really think that everyone who believes it's actually an intellectual standpoint? You don't think it could be grouped into two subcategories of baseless believers, and they are told and therefore they believe everything they are told, as opposed to people who actually believe because they have understanding and knowledge?
That's a good question. See, the way, just like an atheist, just like an agnostic, the way belief works means that we may have different thresholds of what we need to believe. Like I may need this amount of evidence, and you may need just that amount of evidence. Love works the same way. Someone will say, how do you go out with a girl for 3 months and get engaged? How do you know she loves you? So I'll tell them, well, how long do you have to go out with them in order to really know? So a person will say, well, I need a year. So then I'll tell that person, well, maybe someone else needs 3 years. The answer is we each have a different threshold of proof of what is needed in order to engage. I need 3 months to engage. You need a year, you need 3 years. Belief works the same way. If someone comes to me and says, oh, these guys are brain dead because they simply believe based on this evidence, but they didn't look into this, I'll say, well, you know what? That was enough for them. Someone else will say, no, well, I need this amount of evidence. So then I'll say, well, does that make you an intellectual? I'll show you someone else who needs much, much more evidence. Okay? That's how belief works. Now, let me tell you the state of science today. Now, science is my second love after Judaism. I spend hours each day not just studying science, but I have this little thing, which is I like to meet the actual scientists and take them out to lunch. So, for example, does anyone know what gravitational waves are? Gravitational waves, anyone? Gravitational waves, which was the last unproven theory of Albert Einstein, that space-time can be rippled. I'm not going to go into how it works. It is a complex, it's a complex mechanism how it works. And for about 40 years, we have waited to see if gravitational waves are correct, which would prove Albert Einstein. A year and a half ago, the biggest news of your lifetime came out that gravitational waves were proven to be correct. Now, really, the only way we had to prove gravitational waves, don't worry about what they are, but the only way to prove it was when two black holes collided. When you have two black holes collide, that can create enough of a disturbance in space-time that you could create a ripple, and that ripple can be felt on Earth or throughout the galaxy, throughout the universe. How do you find it? So there are two laboratories in America, and they're called Ligo. And Ligo had been waiting for 40 years. They set up shop 40 years ago. They have an x-axis and a y-axis lasers that go at a steady pace. And if there is a ripple in space-time, the x-axis or the y-axis lasers will come a millisecond before the other one, because there's a ripple, so the ripple goes one way. So either way, you're going to have a slight ripple. That will be detected by the most polished mirror that we know. Okay. 40 years waiting to prove it. That means careers have started and ended, and it wasn't proven. A year and a half ago, on Rosh Hashanah, by the way, the news came out that in Ligo, it was detected a ripple for the first time in 40 years, which means that Albert Einstein's last theory was proven correct. So it was huge news, it was big news, And I actually just gave a talk in Dallas about gravitational waves. So I was very excited to hear that, wow, it happened. So who's the head of Ligo? There's a man by the name of Peter Solson. Peter Solson, who is up for a Nobel Prize. So I contacted Peter, and I said, Peter, can I take you out to lunch? This is Rabbi Klatzko. And Peter said, yeah, I'll be in Manhattan in a few months. He's actually a professor in Syracuse. And I took Peter Solson out to lunch, a nice Italian kosher restaurant in Manhattan. And I for 2 hours, we discussed gravitational waves and why they work and why so soon after the first one was found, the second one was found and what they tweaked. Very interesting. And then Peter Solson told me something that blew my mind. He said, I asked him, what was the first thing that you did after you discovered that gravitational waves are correct, that they exist? And you know what Peter Solson, who was Jewish, surprise, you know what the first thing he told me was? He went out and he bought himself tefillin and mezuzah. Peter Solson, up for a Nobel Prize, the greatest discovery in our lifetime, his first reaction is to buy tefillin and mezuzah. So then we got into a discussion why. And he told me that the more you understand about the universe, if you're an intellectual scientist, the harder it is to say that it is a product of random chaos. It's just too hard. It's just too improbable. And we developed a good relationship. As a matter of fact, I have my invitation over here for my son's wedding. I sent it on WhatsApp, and I have a nice little message from Peter Solson wishing me a mazel tov. And interestingly enough, when I went on the last Israel trip, my wife calls me. She says, you'll never guess who stopped by the house when you were gone. I said, who? She said, Mrs. Solson. I said, the scientist's wife from Syracuse? And she said, yeah, they want to be invited for Shabbat. They're not religious, but they want to be invited. Why is Peter Solson, who is a scientist in a much higher magnitude than Hitchens and Dawkins and any of these frauds, I'm sorry, but they are. I used to make videos explaining why each of the things they say are misused, the words they misuse. They consistently misuse physicists. Dawkins is a zoologist who pretends to be a physicist. He's not. And you misspeak the words of people like Steven Weinberg from UT, who are actual physicists, who say that there very well could be a God. So those atheists who come onto YouTube and shoot off, there's no God, there's no God, there's no God, with a really thick English accent to make them sound polished. Today, things have changed, my friends. As a matter of fact, in the past 15 years, things have changed dramatically. And if you're in college and you have an old-fashioned liberal professor, you may not be up to date. But I am, and I want to share with you. What the scientific community is saying today. The scientific community is saying today that there is a much, much more likely chance that the world is not a product of chaos, but rather it's a product of design. And I want to explain to you why that is scientifically. Okay? So again, these are your three choices. Why is it that you have people, more and more so, who are coming around to saying that there must be a creator? And I want to tell you this, Sam, and I want to tell this, Brian and Demi, because it's incredibly important that you should look in the mirror and be able to say, I believe there's a God, not based on a leap. This is not Christianity. I'm not going to just jump and hallelujah. But there are reasons that we say this stuff actually makes sense. There's a reason. So let me give you the arguments, or maybe the two most important arguments, that in case you're ever in front of Richard Dawkins or Hawkins or any of these people, you will be able to speak and stymie them, stump them. They will have nothing to say. Number one is a concept called the cosmological constant. Now, the cosmological constant is something that we've been exploring in the scientific community for many years, but it isn't until recently that we are beginning to realize how utterly powerful this idea is. The cosmological constant says the following, okay? I was speaking today with a few students, and I asked them, what is the shape that you will not find naturally in nature? And what's the answer?
Circle.
A square. A square is not a natural shape. As a matter of fact, the square is a very hard shape to create. Why? Because a 90-degree angle, what's the chance of a rock having a 90-degree angle? What's the chance, Lily? What? Well, 4 in, would it be 360? 1? 4 in 360, right? 4 in 360. However, and it's an aesthetically pleasing angle, but that's okay. Now, what do you got? 2 90-degree angles connected to each other. So now, this is to the power of that, correct? Now you got a third 90-degree angle to the power of that, to the power of that. So you will not find a square. As a matter of fact, in science today, where we're looking for that exoplanet, that planet that exists that may contain life, right? We're looking for that planet, and we look for atmosphere, we look for lots of things. What is the number one element we're looking for? Water, an element, right? We're looking for water, but it's not an element, we know, it's not an element. We're looking for water. What is, and water would say it's possible that there is life. But it doesn't mean intelligent life. Intelligent life, a minimum of what we would need to find is a square. Now, a square is not a very, very complicated shape. We have, our table is a square, our tefillin is a square, but a square says that there is intellect behind it. Yes?
Are you saying a square wouldn't occur, like, created by life? Or are you saying a square wouldn't occur in any, like material?
No, a square wouldn't occur naturally in material.
Okay, like in organic compounds.
There are certain salt crystals that sometimes can be square-like. That's the only thing that we know of in science that are square-like, but not exact squares either, and not predictable. A square, and those are tiny little things. An actual square, if I come and let's say I see a square pillar on Mars, that would cause a big hullabaloo.
Be like life made.
Right, life made it, correct. Yeah.
Where do we find triangles in nature?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, but naturally a triangle would still be easier because it would take away one power. But I don't know. It could be. I'll tell you where it could be. It could be in Mandelbrot design.
In what?
Anyone know Mandelbrot? Okay, one guy knows. Two. Right. It could be in Mandelbrot design we find triangles. Right. I think we find triangles. We may find spades over there as well, but triangles could be found in Mandelbrot. Yeah.
Is this something that's already well accepted by the scientific?
Very well accepted. Very well. But this is not even beginning. This is not even beginning to show how difficult the numbers of design are. There are 4 powers that govern the universe. What are the 4 powers? 4 powers? Gravity. What? Electromagnetic. Strong nuclear. And weak nuclear. Okay? Everything in this world is governed by these 4. Strong nuclear, weak nuclear, electromagnetic, and gravity. 3 of these work on the micro, strong nuclear, weak nuclear, and magnetic, and what works on the macro, gravity. Do they play nicely with each other? They don't. Why? Because gravity doesn't play nicely with quantum theory. Okay? Doesn't work in the quantum level. If you can solve how gravity works on the quantum level, you have become the most significant scientist in all of humanity. That's called the unifying theory of physics. That's what we're looking for. That's what Einstein was looking for. But let me just say one thing. Listen carefully. I know this sounds mumbo-jumbo-ish. I'll pass it quick if you don't like science. But here's the point. Which is, well, let me ask you like this. Is gravity a strong force or a weak force, Andrew? Is gravity strong or weak? It seems like it'd be strong. However, gravity is incredibly weak. And I will prove it to you. Ready? Watch. Ready? Did you just see that? The entire Earth was pulling down this bottle, and little Klatzko here just defeated Earth. Right? I defeated Earth.
I mean, I guess it depends on the size of the mass that you're on. I guess.
So it's weak. It's incredibly weak. Right? It's like you have strong nuclear, you got a little nothing, and in it, right? But gravity is incredibly important. Without gravity, you don't have nuclear fusion. Without nuclear fusion, you don't have a sun, you don't have elements, you got nothing. Gravity is what makes the world go round. Gravity is what makes black holes, infinite gravity. Now, there was an issue, and this is the point I want to mention. There's an issue which is when the world started. Boom, big bang, shoo! When the world scattered out, and before there were ever any kind of elements, and there were just photons, rays of photons. And then those had to eventually, after 300,000 years, become hydrogen and helium. If gravity would be too strong, the world would have collapsed upon itself. If gravity would be too weak, then there would be no elements. There would be no fusion. Now, Hannah, how exact does gravity have to be in the universe for the universe to exist? How precise, how dialed in does the level of gravity have to be so that our universe exists? And the answer is that it has to be precise to within 1 part in 10 to the 19th. Okay? 10 to 19th, that means 19 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. If it's off by 1 part in 10 to the 19th, the universe does not exist. 1 part. If you want to understand that number, because those are too many zeros for us to deal with, let me help you. Scientists have estimated that on Earth there are approximately 10 to the 19th grains of sand, which means all of the oceans, all of the beaches, all of the deserts, all over everywhere, piled high, miles high. There are 10 to the 19th grains of sand in the universe. Imagine Shmuley walks over to the beach, saunters over, bends down, picks up 1 grain of sand, flicks it away, he just destroyed the universe. That's how precise the universe has to be. Just 1 second. That's how precise. Meaning, if the universe were off by even 1 part in 10 to the 19th. Now, here are your choices. You could be dealing with a universe that, yes, we got incredibly lucky to the tune of taking an even heads and coin, meaning not rigged, not fixed, and landing on heads 200 times in a row. Is that going to happen? It's rigged. At a certain point, you say it's rigged. At a certain point, we say it's rigged. At a certain point, you say this is not an accident. Now, this is just 1 number. We're going to speak about some more. But Noi,
How do you get that number?
it's a scientific number. It's well known. You can Google it. Okay? I would love to say that I was the man who did all the math, but as you see, I'm not a spelling person. But it's a very well-known number, the gravity. And if you want to read more about it, first of all, you want to see a video on it. I made a video on it on my website. Please check it out. I have a website called Hashem.com. And you check out Hashem.com. I have a video specifically about the strength of gravity. And it's, as scientists speaking, they give this number as well. Okay, next. If that number were the only number that had to add up, that would be crazy, right, Cassidy? We got lucky to within 1 part in 10 to the 19th. But who says it's a creator? Maybe we just got ridiculously lucky. However, it doesn't work like that. Because cosmological constant says that it's not just one number that has to add up. The following has to make sense. Ready? About 12 years ago, scientists were interested in seeing how much the universe is slowing down. Meaning, you got a Big Bang, the Big Bang explodes the universe right from the outset, correct? Explodes the universe, and then after a while, that energy of the explosion would wear out. So therefore, the universe should be slowing down. Does that make sense? Does it make sense, Hannah? What? For smarty here. So they discovered about 12 years ago, guys, listen up. They discovered about 12 years ago that the universe is not slowing down. Actually, the universe is speeding up. Now that makes no sense. Because if I take a ball and I throw it, then eventually it's going to lose speed. So if it explodes, it should slow down, and rather the universe is speeding up. So I'm going to speed up my talk a little bit because I don't want you to fall asleep. Why is it speeding up? And what we discovered was that there is something that is known as dark matter that is powered by something called dark energy. And that dark energy is between everything and everyone. It takes up more than 90% of the mass of the universe. And that dark energy is what allows the universe to be formed and to function the way it does. And dark energy is incredibly sensitive, way more sensitive than gravity. Without dark energy and dark matter, the universe, again, would implode or go floating off into the stratosphere. It has to be precise. Again, what I'm saying is, without dark energy dialed in exactly to the following number, we would not exist. The universe would not exist. What is that number? So that number is, it has to be precise to within 1 part in 10 to the 120th. Meaning, if the universe was off by even 1 part in 10 to the 120th, 1 with 120 zeros afterwards, if it's off by even 1 part, we don't exist. That means we have to land in a universe that is dialed precisely to 1 part, to within 1 to the 120th. And of course, that's a number that's way too great to picture. So I want to help you picture it. Can I help you picture it? Okay. Atoms. If I take a needle and I look at the tip of the needle, how many atoms can fit at the tip of a needle? A lot. About 10 to 120. About 10 to the 120th, that's how many atoms fit at the tip of the needle. Has anyone ever seen an atom? Right? So 10 to 120th. So that's at the tip of the needle. Let me ask you, how many atoms exist in the entire universe? Now, the universe is bigger than any of us can imagine. The universe is conservatively 93 billion light years across. Now, what a light year is something that we can't fathom, right? How do you fathom a light year? How quickly does light travel? 300,000 kilometers a second. It's incredibly fast. 93 billion light years. How close is the closest star to us? I need you to appreciate this. What? Okay, what's the name of the closest star? Alpha Centauri, right? So if you want to picture how close the closest star is to us, picture the following, okay? Stay with me. I'm going to get off the science soon, but this is important. Imagine the distance between here and the sun, which is how far? 93 million light years away. 93 million miles away. That's from here to the sun. The sun is 93 million miles away. Imagine that distance equals to the thickness of a piece of paper. Meaning the thickness of a paper is 93 million miles. How thick would the paper have to be to reach the first star? How thick? What about this? Is this thick enough? With every one of these being, every paper is 93 million. 93 million, 93 million. How thick would the paper have to be to reach the closest star in our own galaxy? The answer is, it would have to be 70 feet thick. With every sheet being 93 million miles. And that's the closest. If you want to go to the furthest star in our own galaxy, and believe me, our own galaxy is nothing compared to the local group, and the local group is nothing compared to the larger group, which is on and on, right? To get to the furthest star in just our galaxy, how thick would the paper have to be? With each sheet being 93 million miles. You know how thick the paper would have to be? It would have to be 300,000 miles thick. With every sheet being 93 million, and that's just our own galaxy. So, how many atoms exist? How many atoms exist in the entire universe? Crazy! The answer is about 10 to the 70th. That's how many atoms there are in the entire universe. That's an incredibly large number. And yet, my friends, that number is zilch compared to 10 to the 120th. And the chances of us existing are only 1 in 10 to the 120th. According to Steven Weinberg, who is one of the greatest physicists alive today, he is a professor at the University of Texas and also a Jew. He feels that this number is not accurate. He feels the actual number of dark matter, the preciseness has to be, ready for this, my friends? It has to be 10 to the 10 to the 120th. Meaning, if it's off by 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 120th, and that number also has to match gravity, because you need a universe where dark matter is dialed in properly, and so is gravity. They both have to be dialed in, and my friends, these are two of a long set of numbers that each have to be dialed in. The strength of the nuclear force is dialed in precisely. Otherwise, you have no universe. Meaning the following, listen up, meaning, and I know this is going on science, it means that it's incredibly hard to have a universe, and yet here we are. So what does a guy like Dawkins do with this? This is known as two things. Known as the cosmological constant. It's also known as the universal fine-tuning. That's the other name for it. So what does Dawkins do with all of this information? What does he do? He's an atheist. He says it came by itself. Tell me this comes by itself. So what do you think he does? Anyone? What would be the atheist's answer to this dilemma? The answer would be, Allie, you got it? What would an atheist say? It's crazy. Right? Should this not prove that the universe is somehow, in a way, micromanaged? Because if it wasn't, the chances of existence are zero. Really zero. Yeah?
Would the response be if the universe is infinite and the probability of anything is 100%?
So we all know the universe is not infinite. According to science, how old is the universe today? 13.7 billion years. Which, my friends, is a short time. That's not a long time. The universe is not infinite. Many years ago, they believed in an infinite universe until Penzion and Wilson came, right? Jew. And they discovered that the Big Bang, the echo of the Big Bang, and they realized the universe is not a steady state universe which was around infinitely, but the universe had a beginning. And that itself was an issue for science, because science said there's no beginning. Because if there's a beginning, listen up, if there's a beginning, what got that beginning started? If there was an infinite point, what created the infinite point? But more than that, what acted on the infinite point to make it explode? We know the law of inertia. Things stay in the state that they are until acted upon by an outside force, right? It's the law of thermodynamics. You need to have an outside force acting. What is the outside force acting on the Big Bang? Silence in the room of atheists. Silence, utter silence. What acts on the Big Bang? Forget about where that infinitely dense point came from, but what acted on it? If there was nothing, then things as they are stay as they are. Something had to act on it. But that something has to be outside of time. Why? Because time didn't begin yet. According to Einstein, when did time begin? When space began. Because space and time are part of the same fabric. And therefore, whatever acted on that point has to be outside of time. And it has to be incredibly powerful. So what is it that is powerful and acts outside of time? Can create things precisely? We have a name for that. That's called God, or Hashem, or the Almighty, or the Creator. Otherwise, you get stuck. What acted on that infinitely dense point? Nothing. So what would be the atheist answer? Believe me, they have an answer. They do. And here is the answer. The answer is that there are multiverses. You're right. You're right. If this was the only universe that existed, so then there had to be a creator. But comes along Dawkins and says, I've got two answers to the cosmological constant. Answer number one is there are multiple multiverses. And therefore, most universes that sprung into existence did not have these numbers lined up, and therefore they sprung into existence and then out of existence, in and out, until you finally ended up with one universe where all the numbers were correct. And that's the universe that we know about. But there were multiverses. Did anyone ever hear of a multiverse?
Wait, can I ask something? Wait, can I bring up something?
Yes.
Okay, doesn't Judaism say that God created and destroyed worlds? Like, wouldn't in a sense, the multiverse theory also could be said that, like, that's God creating and destroying worlds?
It could be. It could be. We don't know. But it could be, yeah.
Any of this? My question is, what brought God into existence?
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there, okay? Listen up. So, multiverse. Talia, are you cool with the multiverse theory? Does the multiverse theory answer this question? Not really, for two reasons. And I had a part of my conversation with Peter Saulson was all about multiverse. Here are the two objections. Are you guys with me? Are you with me? Here are the two objections to multiverse. Why that's not a good answer for the atheist. Number one, according to physics that we understand today, there is no multiverse. We understand physics in a way that there cannot be a multiverse. Atheists would say, yeah, but a different universe could have a different law of physics. But then we come back and say, but how can you ever prove a universe if we can't have the same law of physics? Every proof that we use uses the laws of physics that we use. Plus, what proof is there that there are multiverses? So number one, there is no proof to multiverse. But there is a much bigger issue. And the much bigger issue is the following. When you have a multiverse, what is it that creates these multiverses? What is spitting out? What's the multiverse factory? What does that look like, a multiverse factory? Let's make a multiverse factory, shall we? Here is a multiverse factory that creates many universes. It looks something like a Dr. Seuss. Do you remember the Dr. Seuss book with the stars, star-bellied Sneetches, stars on the R's? I used to love those. And the half would have stars. Anyone know that? Yay. If you didn't, you should take it out of the library. Okay. Sage for your brother. Okay? Here's a multiverse factory. It's got one of these doohickeys, and then it's got this, and then it's got, and it's got, and a little box over here, and it's got tracks here, and boop, universe, boop, universe, boop, universe, and it poops out universes. Here is the issue. Here's the issue. Something, listen carefully, something that can poop out universes, well, I mean spit out, I'm using the wrong word. Something that can spit out universes consistently must be fine-tuned. Otherwise, it could randomly spit out one, perhaps, maybe, but then it would disappear into oblivion. If something can consistently spit out universes, then it has to be a fine-tuned machine. So then you're back to the same question. Who fine-tuned the machine? You hear? Peter Slauson told me, you end up with a fine-tuner regardless. Okay. So then, Dawkins is stuck. Dawkins is stuck. I'll tell you why I keep harping on Dawkins. I hope one day he sees this, right? I'll tell you why I harp on him. I harp on him because we are the Google nation. We're the YouTube nation. And what we do is, we're not sure about things, we jump to YouTube. And I do the same thing. I want to know, hey, how do I get this Bluetooth on my speaker to connect, whatever? I go to YouTube and you've got some nice, considerate person made me a 3-minute video, and I give him the thumbs up because it's a nice thing to do. He made the video, I should, right? So I'm a mensch. Thumbs up, right? However, YouTube is the Wild West. And anyone can say anything. And if you have good enough production quality, then it's believable. And if you happen to have an accent and a doctorate in the background, and you happen to be good at putting down the next person, then you're king. And therefore, YouTube has made stars out of pop scientists. It's unfortunate. Pop scientists become stars. And sometimes my students will go on and they'll bump into a guy like Dawkins who speaks with an English accent, and I don't have an English accent. My mother's from England, by the way. Yeah, but I don't have an accent. And he goes and he says, oh, an atheist, he's lame Republican, right-wing, gun-toting, roadkill-eating, pickup truck driving rednecks believe in God. But we are the intellectuals sitting in Berkeley and Stanford and UCLA and NYU, and we know better. And when you speak like that with an English accent, and you go and you present your case, then my students say, oh, Rabbi Klatzko says this, but Dawkins says that, and they don't know. It's so not authentic. It's not. It's not. So what I started doing, I didn't complete it. I started taking videos of these pop scientists and showing the contradictions in what they say. And one of those, a video I made, which I never published, I know some I got lost on my computer, but I would like to remake it, is Dawkins saying, yes, we don't know what to do with the cosmological constant. Yes, the universe seems fine-tuned, but Steven Weinberg says that one day, when we truly understand the universe, we will see that the universe had to have those numbers. There was no other way but those numbers of dark matter and gravity and strong nuclear and weak nuclear. It had to be like that. We don't know why it had to be like that, but it had to be. That's what Steven Weinberg, and he quotes Steven Weinberg. Now, I don't know what that does for you, but to me, it's like, well, I don't really know. That's basically what it's saying. However, there is a totally different video on YouTube with Dawkins sitting in front of Steven Weinberg saying, oh, by the way, I quote you as saying, we don't understand the cosmological constant, but one day we will understand why the universe had to be that way. And Steven Weinberg looks at him square in the eye and says, I never said that. Not only didn't I say that, but we will never understand that because the numbers contradict each other. So we will never understand why the universe had to have these numbers because there's nothing that makes the universe have to have these numbers. And then I'll show you videos later where Dawkins continues to misquote Weinberg. What it does is it tells me that the intellectual atheists are just as biased as the Bible-thumping guys in their pews. I don't go for either of them. But I don't let them stand on a soapbox and pontificate because they're an atheist and a scientist. I don't. That's a little bit about the universal fine-tuning, and this is one of the reasons. Now, I will quickly tell you what is the second most critical reason why you can take an atheist and eventually tell the atheist, you're stuck, you've got nowhere to go. Besides universal fine-tuning, it's a concept called sentience. What does sentience mean? Anyone? What?
Self-awareness.
Exactly. Is that what you're going to say? Awareness that one exists. It's sort of like when the machine suddenly comes alive in all these horror movies, right? Sentience, the awareness of oneself transcends anything that we understand about science. Sentience is where the atheist gets stuck. Just because there's a rock doesn't mean the rock knows it's a rock. Just because you've got amino acids combining doesn't make its own awareness. And today, we don't just have awareness of existence, we have awareness of the cosmos and of creation of matter. Sentience is where they get stuck. So both sentience and universal fine-tuning. That is why we believe that there is a creator. Now, let's go one step further, and then we're going to get into religion. Any questions about what I said?
I have a question. What about people who claim that we can't prove that, let's say, like, a dog or a cow doesn't have sentience?
No, they do have sentience.
Okay. Or, like, what about a plant?
Plants do have sentience.
Define sentience, then. Like your
Awareness of self.
Single-celled organisms.
Plants have sentience. Let me share with you a little bit about how I've done research. I never went to college. I went straight to yeshiva. But I didn't want to let it hold me back. My father's an ER doctor, and I desperately wanted to understand. So I spent years and years. If you go into my room right now, in the compound we're staying, you'll find science books sitting on my bed right now. That's what I do in my spare time. Understand? I know it's crazy, right? But I want to understand the universe because the more I understand the universe, the more I understand God. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest scientists alive today, who is in the University of Oregon, found out about me because of my website, and he sent me personally both copies of his book inscribed. So that's that. So when it comes to plants, so I spent a few weeks trying to understand sentience in plants. Can I share with you something crazy, crazy, crazy? Listen to me, this is going to blow you away. If you're awake, you're all awake, that's great. There's a plant called the tobacco plant. Now, the tobacco plant, like every other plant, wants to spread. It wants to multiply. It wants to pass off its seed. So what does it do? It needs to be pollinated. Now, while bees pollinate many things, they don't pollinate everything. Some other insects pollinate other plants. And the pollination of the tobacco plant is done by a certain kind of moth. The moth comes, it flaps its wings, it pollinates, and then it goes and spreads it, and that's how tobacco plants spread. So what does the plant do? Listen carefully. What does a plant do in order to attract the moth? It's got a laboratory inside of its roots, and it knows what the moth likes to smell, what the scent that the moth enjoys. So what it does is it takes this scent and it spreads it out there into the field that is picked up by that moth, and the moth goes, smells it, comes to the plant, and pollinates it. Now that's amazing. However, there's a problem. And the problem is that the moth ends up liking tobacco so much, go figure. The moth ends up liking tobacco plants so much that it begins to lay eggs on tobacco plants. Those eggs become little caterpillars, and those caterpillars enjoy eating something. What do they enjoy eating? Tobacco. And therefore, it's self-destructive, because you get the moths to come, but then the moth creates caterpillars that eat up the plant. So what's a tobacco plant to do? So you know what the tobacco plant does? You guys listening? It's crazy. You know what a tobacco plant does? A tobacco plant says, I have an idea. There's a certain bird that enjoys eating moth caterpillars. So it then cooks up a second scent, which is only smelled by this bird up to a mile away. It lets out that second scent when it's being attacked by caterpillar moths. It lets out that scent. The bird smells it. It comes to the tobacco, finds the caterpillar, and eats it and saves the plant. Did you follow that? What? It is true.
But how does it prove sentience?
I have an entire video about it on Hashem.com.
Wait, how does it prove sentience, though? How does that prove sentience?
So we can't ask it, do you know that you're alive? But when it does things that are clearly to protect itself, it has awareness that it's being eaten. It doesn't let that scent out until it feels it's being eaten.
How do you know if this didn't just, I like to kind of, I guess, slowly go into your next discussion. How do we know that this
We're going to
didn't
get there.
evolve over time?
We're going to get there. We will get there. One more. One second. We had one question over here, and then one question over here. Shh. Go ahead. Again, Hashem.com, you'll see I have a video specifically about the tobacco plant, which shows it in live action. Yeah.
So, like, sentience is awareness, yeah, but I feel like there's a difference between the awareness in humans and the awareness in animals and plants, because in plants it seems more like it's evolution, like the tobacco plants that produce the scent for birds live the other way. But with humans, awareness is so much more complex, because we're not only aware of ourselves, but we're aware of...
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's not on the same level.
It seems like plants and animals have sentience, because it seems more like evolution.
There's two things. First off, I would agree with you, except for the fact that the plant only lets out that chemical when it feels it's being eaten. Now, you could say anything's evolution, but the idea that it knows it's being eaten and only then to cook up that chemical is a level of sentience. It is a cause and effect. Now, you could say only only plants with sentience survived, but you still have to come to it. It has certain awareness. Otherwise, it would let out that at all times. It's a direct cause and effect. It's aware that it's being eaten, so it lets out that. So maybe, again, sentience is needed or more sentience survives, but the idea of sentience itself.
Okay, so it's more of like a broad term.
Yeah, it's a broad term, but it's something that a rock doesn't have. A rock that's being smashed can't evolve into something to make you stop smashing it.
Oh, so you mean sentience like life?
Right, so we call it life, yeah.
So what would the threshold, in your opinion, of sentience be? Like bacteria?
Back to
Simply living, would for instance, be the result of sentience in bacteria?
So I don't know. I have not been the one to define sentience. Maybe what I'll do is I'll give you one more example of sentience in plants, which may be a little more to the point. Listen up. When you have a tree, a very large tree in a forest, and there are a lot of trees in the forest, there is a fight. And the fight is for sunlight. And the bigger trees, they cover the smaller trees, and they take away their sunlight, and they also absorb the rain first. And the bigger trees get bigger and bigger. That's why you have some trees that are massive redwoods, right? Huge, gigantic trees. And the trees around them often grow much smaller. However, they have discovered that there are certain trees around them that do grow bigger even though they're covered. So they did research, and this again is a video on my website. And they discovered the following, that a tree that drops a seed of its own, even if that seed is one of those helicopter seeds, you know, it goes and it falls 500 feet away or 1,000 feet away. When it takes root, the mother tree, is aware of its seedlings, and it creates roots that intertwine with its own child. It knows which is its child, and it takes some of its nutrients, some of its sunlight, some of its water, and it channels it to its babies, to its baby trees, going around the seedlings of other trees, identifying the seeds of its own. How did they discover that? Well, one of the things that they did was they took liquid and they dyed it. They add dye. And then they discovered that same dye in the trees of its seedlings very far away, understanding that there was an underground connection between mother and child tree. Evolution did not need that to happen. There's something going on, and by the way, this is not me. Talmud speaks about King Solomon knew the language of the trees, and the trees do have a language with wind and with pollen. There's a distress signal that trees let out when they're in distress. When you break a tree, when you break a branch, there's actually a real distress signal. Did you know that? We don't give plants enough credit. I'm an eco guy. Is anyone else? Eco-friendly. Okay. You got to appreciate plants. They're not just plants. It's amazing. Okay, yes?
They're called talking trees. I Googled it.
Yay!
I wanted to it sounded like a child's book.
You can trust me. I don't make stuff up. But anything I say, you can...
They're called talking trees, and it's like a real thing.
I know it's a real thing. Well, the Talmud speaks about it, so I know it's true. Okay, question.
So, the argument you made at the beginning is there a creator, or do you believe in God? And you know what you've presented over the last hour is instances of rarity in science. And the fundamental dichotomy or dilemma is that science can only describe what happens. It doesn't explain why it happens or who or if someone created it.
Correct.
And so ultimately a belief in God is, to me, who created that. And that's something that science will never explain. And I believe in God because of almost the assertion you're making that it's just not by chance. But I don't think science will ever, no matter if we have string theory, this theory, that theory, you can list 1,000 theories, it will never prove God. And so I don't know that it's even worth using science as a tool to prove
I agree with you. The only reason that I do it is because I feel that scientists have overstepped their bounds. You are right. If I were very glib, I'd stand up and I'd say, religion and science do two different things. Religion says how, and science says how, and religion says why, and the story, goodbye, and I just took care of the hour. But the reason I don't is because science, for the past half a century or more has overstepped their bounds, and they've come to theological conclusions based on science. So I'm saying, if you're going to come to a theological conclusion, the theological conclusion is the opposite, not what you're saying. Now, I want to say one more thing about that. There is a law. It's not a well-understood law, but it's called the Law of Entropy. And one of the concepts behind the Law of Entropy, which was it the third law of thermodynamics? One of the concepts is that things tend to go from a state of organization to a state of chaos and not the other way around. So if I have a glass and I knock it, it breaks, it's not going to remake itself, right? Entropy says the more time goes on, the more things dissolve. Chaos begets chaos. Even if you organize something, by the way, this is true even for a building. If you take a building and you just ignore it, right? After 50 years, the building will be in ruins. You didn't do anything, but things go naturally to a state of decay and chaos. The world contradicts the law of entropy. Because if there was this big bang, boom, then you should have chaos. And from chaos should come more chaos. And instead of more chaos, you have more and more and more and more organization. From a bang all the way to DNA, which we're going to speak about in a moment. Yeah?
But as we see through things like shelf lives of different, and how everything fades, even if there are no outside forces, that bonds between atoms are not fully stable, and atoms aren't completely whole.
Right.
So in that, can't you just say that the fading comes from the chemical bonds fading, wearing?
You could say that, but you still had to go from a point of chaos to chemical bonds. There was still a direction of tremendous organization. Even if in the end it does, I understand what you're saying, even in the end it does begin to dissipate, but even more than that, the fact is that the organization is predictable, which makes it a true organized system. The fact that you could take chaos and predict an organized system disagrees with the concept of entropy, even if eventually it will dissipate. Otherwise, I couldn't predict. I could predict organization. Right? That's how we do everything in science. We make predictions, and it comes so from chaos to organization. But I hear what you're saying. It's a good point. Yeah?
I just wanted to say that even though there might be like a fundamental dichotomy between religion and science, I appreciated you prefacing the conversation about religion with this, because I think for most people, this pragmatic kind of presentation is really helpful. Because I don't study science, and I kind of believe if it's published in a journal, it must have some truth. But this was I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I'm always scared to give too much science because you just came from college, and I feel like your eyes are going to glaze over. But I use this because I want to understand the universe. The more we understand it, that's how Abraham became a Jew. He became the forefather of the Jews because he understood the universe. He tried to understand, he tried to understand how it works. And the truth is, I could speak about this for days and days. We didn't touch anything. We didn't touch why we need black holes in the universe, or why the universe has to be so large. There's a lot. We can speak about it privately. I'll be here all week. Yeah?
So then,
2 weeks.
what does science say about a chaos creating an unorganized thing? That contradicts it. What do people say? How do they?
I have yet to see a good answer. I actually published a question and answers of all the key questions in science under my most recent video on Hashem.com. It's worth looking. It's a very intellectual question and answer, hammering home science, the issues, and the questions, okay? All this is just for existence. None of what I just said explains a banana. None of what I just said explains an eye. Who's the person who says they love eyes here? Who's my eye gal? Eye, two eyes? But you're an eye scientist? You're an optometrist.
Oh, I just
Eyes? Are eyes cool? Eyes aren't cool. Eyes are miraculously cool.
Rabbi, when you know the inner workings of what goes on in your eye and every day, what's going on?
Maggie, let us share. Can we share? Let us share the eye. My friends, first off, everyone blink. You know, quickly you blinked in a blink. 21 chemicals just bathed your eye. And you didn't even realize it. That's way more than Baal Shalom. Way more. Yes, you've got, or saline solution, you've got a pupil that takes exactly the right amount of eye. It is able to drink in the exact amount of light that is needed. And it does it instantly, much quicker than your iPhone. You've got a, oh, this is so incredible. Besides, it's covered with a protective layer. Besides the fact that when you see the image is reflected in the back of your eye upside down, and your brain flips it around. Besides that, listen carefully, this is so incredible. Those images are actually electrical currents. Actually, they're actually chemicals that become electrical currents, that become chemicals that become electrical currents without losing any information in the process. Correct?
Yeah.
Crazy. How does the chemical that's in the back, what you're seeing is just a chemical reaction. You're a chemical reaction, that's all I'm seeing. And that chemical reaction then has to go and become an electrical current that has to jump to my brain, but my brain needs to reference you because I've seen you before. Where did I see you? My brain knows. So what it does is it races around my brain, but as it races around my brain, there are gaps, synapses in my brain. So it's got to go from electric and it's got to jump the synapse. So how does it do that? Because it becomes synapse. How does it do that? What? Neurotransmitters that make it go from a electrical signal to a chemical, and then become back an electrical signal, and it doesn't lose any information at all. The idea that the light, that your eyes can see color. Guys, did any of you see, I like very emotional YouTube videos. I sit down with my wife and I see like soldiers coming home. You like it? And like the little kid, the little kid is in his play, like in a play, and all of a sudden daddy comes in with with a whole soldier uniform, and the kid begins to cry. Ah! You see those? I love those. I like seeing them. So if you've never seen this, guys, about 2 years ago, they invented glasses for people who are colorblind.
Really?
Yes. You'll tell me. They invented glasses. And you put them on, and for the first time in your life, you can see color. It's about $300. What are they called again? Ichroma, right, ichroma.
For some people, it have separate wavelengths, and or if you're colorblind, you might have like it helps separate wavelengths.
Well, people think they're seeing color. And people put them on. Guys, you have to see these YouTube videos. They put them on, and they say, oh, just try these on. And the guy stands there, and for the first time in his life, he sees color. And one person after the next cries, blue. Is that blue? Is that pink? That's pink. And we take it for granted. Okay, listen up. Shh. We want to take a break. It's a 5-minute break. We are going to have food. If you come late, you'll miss the food and you'll miss the talk. 5 minutes bathroom. Okay, listen up, everyone. We just did part 1 where we went through why is it that people say the world is a product of design rather than a product of chaos. I want to go one step further with this. When we look at this world, the intricacies and the design are things that even 100 years ago, they never could have understood. Does anyone know who Francis Crick was? Not a watchmaker, but a DNA. Does anyone know what DNA stands for? Okay, what are the 4 letters in DNA? A, C, T, G. When looking at DNA, there is another reason to take the claim of Judaism and the fact that there's a God seriously. It's very, very difficult for anyone to stand up here and encapsulate what DNA is and how it works in one class. Even in 1 year, it would take a lifetime. DNA, the double helix, is computing squared squared. Computing, which is made of ones and zeros, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, right? That would be linear compared to the information that's contained in the double helix, which has 4 letters. That can be flipped and reflipped. That can be changed and interchanged to create an eye, an ear, a toe, a leaf, a butterfly. The Genome Project has proven that most of living life shares similar DNA, which means that you could take this incredibly advanced system, decode it, and with it create a butterfly, create an ostrich, and create a sunflower. DNA, which is so small, it is so small that you can't even see it, if it were unraveled, would be 8 feet long, each little strand. But it's so small, it's so tightly raveled, you can't even see it. All one has to do is understand DNA. Now, DNA is not just this amazing code, but it's self-replicating code. You could have code which looks like this, and in order to replicate that code, you divide it. On one side, you make it 2 again. And on the other side, you do the same thing but backwards. And you replicate and replicate. DNA has within it something now that is changing science. And those of you that are into biology or chemistry, you know how exciting it is what I'm about to mention to you. We have discovered a protein that works with something called CRISPR. Does anyone know what CRISPR is? We got 4 CRISPR people here. And through CRISPR, this little machine that's inside of you that can isolate bad DNA, can replace it, and it goes around and patrols. DNA, to come from nothing, would be a tremendous stretch. The immune system. Did anyone here ever study the immune system? If you didn't, you're missing out. I recently had my kids study the immune system. I want them to appreciate how complex our world is. Anyways, I'll mention one more thing. I really want to move on. We could speak about science stuff for a long time, but I want to go into theology. One more thing I want to mention. The most complicated item in the universe is what? The human brain. Human brain. Not even a question. The human brain is so complex. It processes so much information every second that in order to replicate the human brain, how many, I'm going to show you a little something here. This, my friends, is the latest MacBook Pro. How many of these would it take to duplicate the processing power of Tony's brain? How many of these iCore 7, 2 terabytes? How many of these would it take, Tony? So Tony, guys, Tony says he's simple. However, what Tony doesn't realize is, at this moment, he is listening to what I'm saying and he's processing the words. He's looking at me while cleaning his teeth with his tongue to get all the bamba out, while smiling, while squinting, while his immune system and his heart and his sugar is being regulated with his internal insulin, and on and on and on. How many of these MacBook Pros would it take to equal one of Tony's brain's processing power? Does anyone want to guess? Yes, Rachel. 5, says Rachel. 5. These are a really good one, by the way. 5. The number is higher than 5. What do you say? Okay, sentience. But let's just say the processing power. You're right. The processing. How many?
200.
At least.
75. The actual number, according to a beautiful report by NBC, I have it again. I took that report, I put it on Hashem.com. The number of MacBooks it would take to equal the processing power of your brain is 100. Wait, 100 million. 100 million laptops to do the processing power of a person's brain. The fact that it exists and we appreciate it while you're feeling your clothing, while your body is regulating its temperature, while your ears and sense of balance is in line, while it's regulating the liquid in the stapes, right? The ear? Who are my ear people? Your ear people? There's two. There's the stapes and the mallet, right? Stapes and mallet, right? In the ear. And within the ear. When you're hearing me, how could you hear me? My voice is not powerful, and the waves, they just dissipate. How is it that you can even hear me? You know how? Because you've got two things in either stapes and the mallet. And the stapes, the mallet hits on the stapes, and it amplifies the sound 50 times. I'm actually speaking 50 times softer than you're hearing me. In the same way, for example, that if a heavy lady steps on your foot with a spiky high heel, you're going to feel all the weight, and it's going to be very painful. Why will it be so painful? Because all of the weight is concentrated on one little point. That's how the ear works. It takes the mallet very wide, and then it concentrates it on the stapes, and it amplifies it. The ears, you could hear. The ear has curves. They made a radio based on the curves of your ear. Anyone know what it's called? The Bose wave radio. The Bose wave radio is based on the curves. Your curves are built to capture low frequency, to capture high frequency. They are snug against your ear. When you go to sleep, they don't stick out. But they capture sound on both sides. So if you hear a car coming, you know what side it's coming from. And your reflexes act instantly. Sometimes you're slow and klutzy. But usually usually act instantly, on and on. Okay. That's God and the universe. Now, I am going to jump now to religion.